Good morning. My name is Donna Marie Collins. I'm the hearing examiner that will be presiding over this morning's hearing. It's a zoning request to rezone property at the corner of Bass Road and Gladiolus. The request is for a specific use. It's a self-storage facility. All testimony and evidence that we accept during these hearings will be taken in under oath. At the end of my introductory remarks, I will administer the oath to everyone in the room who plans on putting testimony or evidence into the record. For those of you that are not familiar with this process, rezonings of this nature, I am not the final decision maker, but I accept all testimony and evidence and prepare a recommendation to the Board of County Commissioners. They are the final decision makers in the case. That hearing is typically held anywhere between 2 and 4 weeks following the issuance of my recommendation. If you fill out a public participation form over by the door and provide your email address, you will receive a copy of my recommendation once it is issued, as well as you will receive notice of the final board hearing via your email. If you don't wish to provide your email address, you can put your street address and notice of the hearing will be mailed to you. The order of proceedings is as follows. We start with the applicant, who is the property owner's representatives. Sometimes it is the owner of the property, sometimes it's the contract purchaser, but they are the ones that filed the request. Your presentation may consist of 1 or more witnesses. Occasionally there'll be expert witnesses. They will present their case as to why the request is consistent with the county's land development regulations and the criteria for approval of rezoning requests. At the conclusion of their presentation, we will go to the county staff planner that reviewed the request and prepared the staff report. The staff report in this case recommended approval. The staff report is a public record and you can obtain it online. At the conclusion of staff's presentation, I will open up the floor to members of the public that wish to speak. At that time, you should come to the podium, state your name. We'll have an aerial map of the area up on the screen, and you can indicate to us where you live in relationship to the property. Please share what your concerns are with the request. Oftentimes I find that people that live in proximity to a property that's proposed for rezoning, they're not completely against or totally for, but they have very specific concerns. If you share them with us, you allow the applicant the opportunity to clarify those issues for you, and on occasion, you give us the opportunity to craft a condition to address those concerns where appropriate. At the conclusion of staff public participation, I will close the public input portion of the hearing and I will return to the parties. They will take that time to respond to any requests that were made by the public. They will answer any questions that were raised by the public at that time, and they will provide concluding remarks. Once the hearing is over, I will prepare a recommendation. That typically takes me anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks, depending on my caseload and where this case is in relationship to other cases I've already heard. But as I said before, if you provide your email address, you will receive a copy of that recommendation and notice of further board action on the case. If you would like the opportunity to speak to the Board of County Commissioners at the final hearing, you must participate at this level. You must come to the podium and provide your name and any concerns or questions you may have. That is how you secure standing to participate at the final board hearing. I think that's everything, except to say when you ask your questions during public input, they will not be answered in that moment. We will make note of all questions, and then when we go back to the parties, they'll answer all questions at that time. We find that that works better because sometimes people have the same question and then they don't listen to the answer when it's being provided. So we find after years of experience that this method works best. Present your questions, we'll note them, and then they'll be responded to after. Okay, please raise your right hand if you intend on speaking on the record. Do you swear or affirm the testimony and evidence you place in the record this morning will be the truth?
We do.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for coming. Hi.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. For the record, my name is Richard Aiken. I'm an attorney with the Henderson Franklin Law Firm here in Fort Myers. I'm here this morning on behalf of the applicant on the request DCI 2022-00045. I have with me here our project team this morning, and you'll hear today from Ben Smith, who's an AICP. He's the project planner with Morris Depew and Associates. You're also going to hear from Ryan Shute. He's the project engineer, also with Morris Depew and Associates. I also have Cindy Leal, who is also a planner with Morris Depew, and she doesn't have any PowerPoint slides this morning, but is available, and potentially if there were any questions that came up that she could address. We also have Paul Owen, who's our environmental consultant. He's available for questions or issues as they may arise. The applicant submitted a 48-hour notice on January 30th of 2023, which identified a single unresolved issue with the staff report. That issue pertains to the condition proposed by staff regarding the south buffer. It's on page 9, environmental condition 2 of the staff report. In response to that condition, the applicant submitted a proposed revised condition. Staff then responded with further revised condition on February 1st, 2023. The applicant and staff are now in agreement with the condition that staff proposed on February 1st, 2023 in their letter. So that condition will replace environmental condition 2 on page 9 of the staff report. I do have a clean copy of that if you would like.
No, I'm good on that. I have, it's not condition 2 though, it's condition,
Environmental.
the environmental condition, okay. I think what I did was when I started working on this case in advance, I numbered them and I gave the environmental conditions separate numbers, but I understand where it goes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, Your Honor, there are no unresolved issues, and the applicant is in agreement with the remainder of the staff report in this matter.
Very good.
I do have, before I begin, a copy of the applicant's PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, this is applicant's exhibit 1. Thank you.
I also have a full-size copy of the master concept plan.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. So I'll just briefly go into a little bit of the project background before Mr. Shute comes up. As you mentioned earlier, the project is 9.18 acres. It's located at 9651 Gladiolus Drive at the southwest intersection of Gladiolus Drive and Bass Road. The current zoning on the property is community commercial. The future land use is urban community. It's currently a vacant lot with sporadic vegetation throughout. The current zoning that applies to the parcel is Z81029. That 1981 zoning applied to other parcels as well as this parcel. Those other parcels that were included in the 81 zoning have gone through subsequent rezonings to be changed. This parcel, it remains, that zoning remains applicable to this parcel. It is community commercial. The request here is to change from the community commercial zoning district to a commercial plan development. The true reason for that, and as you mentioned, we're requesting a use that allows for a warehouse facility. The community commercial zoning district would allow for a mini warehouse by special exception. However, it doesn't allow for a public warehouse, and due to the way that the Land Development Code in Lee County defines public warehouse versus mini warehouse, it specifically relates to whether the access doors are on the inside of the building or the exterior of the building. And so the applicant here is requesting a use that would allow for a public warehouse essentially under the Land Development Code. That would not be allowed by special exception in the community commercial district, so we need to go through the CPD process. That's the primary reason for doing that. As mentioned, we're asking to establish a new commercial plan development to allow for 140,800 square feet of commercial self-storage space. With that, I will turn it over to Mr. Shute, who's the project engineer. He can go through his background, but I know that he has been accepted as an expert.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
In the staff report, I have some uses in the list of uses that are struck through, and I'd like to determine whether the applicant is accepting those suggested strike-throughs.
We are.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. I'm Ryan Shute with the Morris DePue Associates. I'm here to talk about traffic and drainage for the proposed project, as well as general site design. My background is I've been working in Lee County for 26 years. I've been licensed in the state of Florida as a professional engineer since 1999, 2000. I don't even know the exact date, but for over 20 years. And I've presented on those topics in this forum previously.
Yes, you may proceed.
So I'm going to touch generally on the stormwater management characteristics of the property. At this stage, we're in zoning, so we're not in full-blown site design, so it's just going to be general parameters. The existing site has topographic features that generally flat, but has a drainage pattern that flows from the northeast. Where's the laser? From the northeast to the southwest, but it's mostly generally flat. The Gladiolus Preserve subdivision, their design actually intended for the accept drainage from our parcel into a culvert that is depicted on the slide over here in this corner of the site. At this point, as we go through our design, we plan to maintain that drainage pattern, and the site does not accept drainage from Gladiolus or Bass Road. It does not accept drainage from Gladiolus Preserve or from the small commercial office building from the west, so it's pretty isolated as far as existing conditions.
Will the existing culvert accommodate the runoff in the developed state?
Yes, we're going to be limited to a allowable discharge rate, and that's very small amount of water. It's less than, it's probably in the 1 to 2 CFS range, and the culvert calculations will allow it to proceed. If we can't, if we have issues with capacity of the culvert, we can actually reduce our discharge rate to maintain within capacity. So we're going to bring up the MCP. I'll hit on some of the features of it at this point. For water management purposes, the site concept plan depicts a large, for this parcel size, stormwater wet detention lake on the western portion of the site. The stormwater management system will have that main feature, as well as perimeter berms and some on-site dry swales to convey water to the pond. The water management system is going to be designed to detain a 25-year, 3-day storm event per South Florida Water Management District criteria, just similar to all other projects that have to obtain water management permits in this area of Florida.
Where's the outfall?
The outfall in this location is going to be in this general area.
And is that where the culvert is?
Correct. Correct. Some other features of the site, before I go into traffic. The site will have one access point. It's going to be located on Gladiolus Road. It's a single right in, right out access, so there'll be no left-hand turns leaving the site. The primary characteristic of the buildings on the site is one large, they call a climate-controlled storage building, and that is the large rectangle depicted in this location. The features of that type of building is that it will be air-conditioned, and there'll be a primary entrance for members of the public who decide to lease there. It's not going to have multiple doors on the exterior of the building. It'll have a couple service doors, but one primary entrance for people to go to their units. The other two buildings on the site are going to be what is called non-climate controlled. There's one located adjacent to Bass Road and one located parallel to the south property line. Again, those buildings are going to be the traditional mini storage, which have the doors on the exterior.
Is there a height differential between those two buildings?
A small height differential. The client tells me that the climate control buildings will probably be 15 to 20 feet high. It's still going to be single story. And then the non-climate control building will probably be about 10 to 11 feet high. But they're all, I'm sorry?
How high is the climate control?
They said up to 15 to 20 is what they told me when I asked the question. But it's intended to be single story, so it might be just some features as they do the architectural.
So is it not 35 feet? I need clarification on this.
Yes. So the zoning request would be up to 35 feet. I think Mr. Schute's saying that the actual, what will actually be built will be less than that. Am I correct, Ryan?
Correct.
Both buildings will not be higher than 35 feet. And you're
Correct.
telling me the larger building, climate controlled, will be larger, taller than the non-climate controlled buildings?
That's correct.
Okay.
But they're both intended to be single story at this point, but we're only requesting the 35 feet height, which is allowable for similar zonings of this.
Right, we only regulate the height. How many stories you want to do is up to you.
So following some other features, so the non-climate controlled building will only have doors facing the north, facing the climate controlled building. There'll be no exterior doors facing the south towards the residential. So basically that building is really going to act like a wall towards the residents as opposed to having any public or anybody entering the building from the south side. Traffic. Any questions generally on the site plan?
All right, so there'll be two building walls actually facing the residential. One will be of the non-climate control, shorter building, and then the climate controlled building will also be facing the residents.
Correct, buffered by the lower building.
Okay, and are the same restrictions intended to apply to both buildings where there's going to be no doors or window openings?
No, that would only be for the south climate controlled building, non-climate controlled building, I'm sorry, the south building.
All right, so the taller building that faces residential will have windows?
I don't know the features of windows. It will have openings
At ground level?
at ground level, but it will not have overhead doors or multiple interiors. It will have emergency exits and a service bay.
Just give me a moment, please. Okay, the condition that you agreed on does not specify between the two buildings. So I require clarification on the application of condition 2G as you have presented it. And that doesn't have to be you, Mr. Shute, it can be somebody else, but I'd like that before the close of hearing. Thank you.
I'm going to transition into traffic. The public warehouse / mini storage use historically does not generate a great deal of traffic. Our analysis shows, based on the ITE trip generation manual, that approximately 204 daily trips would potentially be entering and exiting the site. And then, again, for the benefit of the public, 204 trips means that it's approximately 102 vehicles entering and leaving the site. A trip is considered one entry and then one exit. So you double the number of cars to essentially determine your trips. In the morning, the peak hour, which is between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m., there are 13 daily average peak hour trips. Again, that's around 6 to 7 cars entering and leaving the facility. And then in the PM peak hour between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m., there's 21 peak hour trips modeled. And again, that's around 10 to 11 potential cars leaving and entering the site.
And this is likely worst case scenario, right?
Correct.
And how does this compare with its existing zoning of community commercial and the uses that can be permitted in that category?
Without having the list of uses in front of me, I'd say public warehouse generates a lot less traffic than some of the potential uses in community commercial, such as office, retail. I'd have to look at the list of uses to compare it, but this is one of the least intensive types of development for traffic. So the net, based on the trip generation rate, the project is not going to trigger adverse impacts on the adjacent roadways. The adjacent roadway, Gladiolus, has sufficient capacity to handle the proposed project, and we concur with staff that the project will not place a burden on the public facilities.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, thank you.
Madam Hearing Examiner, Ben Smith, who's the project planner, is going to come up next. Mr. Smith has not previously been accepted as an expert in front of the Lee County Hearing Examiner. He is an AICP certified planner. He's the current director of planning for Morris Depew. He's previously served as a planner for other jurisdictions, including City of Fort Myers, Village of Estero. He's got about 15 years of experience as a planner. I'll let him come up and go through that experience a little bit more. I also have a copy of his resume here, if I could provide that to you.
Thank you. Applicants, Exhibit 3. Mr. Smith, just give me a minute to do some housekeeping. You can come to the podium. Okay, if you would just briefly start with an overview of your educational background and then segue into your professional working background as it relates to urban planning.
Good morning, Madam Hearing Examiner. I'm Ben Smith with Morris Depew Associates. I am the Director of Planning there. I attended the University of Florida and obtained a bachelor's degree from that institution. I began practicing as a planner a little over 15 years ago. I received my AICP certification in 2013 and have held and maintained it since. The bulk of my planning career has been comprised of providing consultation to local governments, including Lee County and most every municipality within Lee County, including Fort Myers, Sanibel, City of Fort Myers Beach, Village of Estero, Bonita Springs. I joined Morris Depew Associates in over a year and about 3 months ago. Previous to that, I want to mention we did have several projects in Lee County where we assisted the county with a couple major projects, one of which was providing land development code revisions to implement the Page Park community planning area, and that task involved significant workshopping with the community and crafting land development codes based on the workshopping and based on the planning policies that had already been placed in the Lee Plan. We also assisted Lee County with the formation of an overlay district for the North Fort Myers area to implement some of the goals of the Lee Plan for the North Fort Myers community planning area. Since I've joined Morris Depew Associates, I have been involved in quite a few projects within Lee County. I have not had the opportunity to testify with the hearing examiner until now, but I do have knowledge of the Lee Plan and the county's land development code.
Okay, thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. The subject property fronts on Gladiolus Drive, a county-maintained arterial roadway, and Bass Road, a county-maintained major collector. To the north of Gladiolus is the Villages of Ascot, a residential community, the Iona Hope Episcopal Church, and the Lakes Regional Library. To the east of Bass Road is Laguna Lakes, a residential community. To the south is the residential portion of Gladiolus Preserve, and to the west is the commercial portion of Gladiolus Preserve, which includes, at this time, an insurance agency, medical offices, a restaurant, and a florist. The subject property is within the Lee County Utilities Future Service Area as depicted on maps 4A and 4B of the Lee Plan. Letters of request for availability for water and sewer service were sent to Lee County Utilities as part of this application, and responses were received assuring that capacity is available to meet the projected demands of the proposed development. The project will also be serviced by the West District Office of the Lee County Sheriff's Office and the Iona-McGregor Fire District. The proposed schedule of uses is limited to the list you see here and has been tailored to accommodate the proposed storage facility. Notably, the public warehouse use is not a permitted use in the community commercial zoning district, and the mini warehouse use is listed as a special exception in the community commercial district, which is the current zoning designation of the property. Again, that is the reason for this rezoning request, is to make sure that those uses are allowable on the subject property. The proposed master concept plan has been designed with direct access to Gladiolus and parking for the project located along the Gladiolus frontage. The 3 separate storage buildings have already been described previously. The location of dry detention and wet detention areas are specified on the plan, and I'll talk about the proposed buffers in the next couple slides. Before we get into the buffers, I'd like to note that there is an existing wall on the north side of Gladiolus Preserve, and it does extend along the full length of the south property line of the subject property, and it's approximately 6 foot tall. Here is a better view of that wall from the subject property. You can see the existing fence on the subject property, which runs parallel to the wall on the adjacent Gladiolus Preserve property. And also visible are the screen enclosures of the single-family residence on the other side of the wall. A 15-foot wide Type D buffer is proposed on the north and east sides along Gladiolus and Bass Road frontages. A 5-foot Type A buffer is proposed along the west property line adjacent to the commercial portion of the existing Gladiolus Preserve. And a 30-foot wide Type F buffer is proposed along the south property line adjacent to the residential portion of the existing Gladiolus Preserve. Where the southern buffer separates the proposed storage building from the residential portion of Gladiolus Preserve, an enhanced landscape buffer will be provided, which includes an additional 10 sable palm trees per 100 linear feet. Those trees are in addition to what a Type F buffer typically consists of.
So that's only along the boundary of the building?
That's correct.
Okay, so water detention, it'll just be Type F standards?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay.
This diagram depicts a cross-section of the proposed enhanced buffer along the south property line. And this diagram depicts the elevation of the proposed enhanced buffer along that south property line. I'd like to note the proposed building outline is visible and depicted here. And I do want to point out that the latest condition that we are in agreement with, that staff has recommended, proposes that the additional sable palms will be clustered, not soldered. We have not updated this diagram in the time that that condition was proposed. It is showing the soldered, but they will be clustered as per staff's recommended condition.
And the canopy trees?
Canopy trees are going to be spaced evenly. That's the proposed.
And then the palms clustered?
It's my understanding that the additional palms will be clustered. The enhanced.
So this slide really is not applicable in any way, right, to what I can expect to see if I was on the residential side?
We just received staff's recommended condition regarding the
Right.
clustering. We did not have an opportunity to update this.
So, I mean, none of these are canopy trees, though, so.
I believe, so these are the canopy trees right here. And if I go back a slide, here you can see, this is a
I
canopy
see.
tree.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Oops. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank
Okay.
you.
The required building setbacks are depicted on the master concept plan, though we'd like to note that the proposed building footprints exceed the minimum setback requirements. Do you want me to pause, Madam Examiner?
Yes. Okay, so it's not clear to me from proposed condition on the south buffer where we have an enhancement, a differentiation between the water detention area and the building. So it's only, the south buffer condition applies only to behind the building? I don't see where this distinguished, did I miss it?
Please.
Cindy Leal for the record. The condition that staff proposed most recently does specify that the buffer is proposed, the enhanced segment of the buffer is proposed along the southern property line where any storage building is adjacent to a residential use.
Right, but where does this type F buffer come into play along the
The type F,
water retention?
okay, the type F buffer does run along the entire segment. The only difference in the enhancement is the additional 10 clustered sable palms per 100 linear feet.
So is the type F buffer required by code between the two?
Yes.
It's commercial next to residential.
Right. Okay, I might work on this language a little bit to clarify that, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
I just want to repeat that the setbacks, required setbacks are depicted on the master concept plan, though the building footprints as proposed are exceeding the minimum setback requirements.
So wait, what's exceeding?
So here you'll see that the building setbacks are shown on the master concept plan, but the actual building footprints are depicting the location of the buildings further away from the property line than is required.
So where is it going to be built?
You mean the actual building setback
Right.
in the location shown on the master concept plan?
Okay, so the code requirement is one thing,
And we're exceeding that
and is
requirement.
that reflected on the master concept plan?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
We're demonstrating here what the minimum requirement is for the setbacks. So here, a 25-foot setback is required, and the actual building line is much further than 25 feet from the property line.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'd like to get into the proposed deviations. Deviation request number 1 is to reduce the wet detention lake setback from adjacent separately owned property from 50 feet to 25 feet on the west and south property lines. So here we have property under separate ownership. 50 feet is required by code, and we're requesting 25 feet. This request has been made in order to allow for greater on-site storage of water, and the applicant is offering to provide the 4-foot fence along the west and south sides of the lake in order to ameliorate any concerns. The staff is not opposing this deviation. Deviation request number 2 is to reduce the size of the waste enclosure from the required 1,143 square feet to a proposed 216 square feet. As part of the lease agreement, tenants will be prohibited from utilizing the on-site waste disposal facilities. The on-site waste disposal will be used for use only by the staff of the administrative offices. The dumpster will be fenced off and signs will be posted around the dumpster enclosure area indicating that dumping is prohibited. Deviation request number 3 is to eliminate the requirement for an interconnection between adjacent commercial property. So that would be over here. This request has been made for the benefit of this commercial property and those tenants. That commercial facility was not designed to accommodate regular use by the large trucks that are anticipated to frequent this site. Think about moving trucks, U-Hauls, likely to be coming here to load and unload. We believe that this request will eliminate any conflicts that could arise if those trucks are transversing between this property to that commercial property. Deviation request number 4 is to reduce the wet detention lake setback from an arterial right-of-way line from 50 feet to 25 feet on the north property line. So here's the Gladiolus arterial. 50 feet is required. We're proposing 25 feet. And again, this is to allow for greater on-site storage of water, and the applicant is offering to provide a 4-foot fence in that area.
Is there any specifications on the fence that's to be provided in that area since it's along Gladiolus?
There is no specification, but basically it has to be a solid fence, cannot be barbed wire or anything like that.
Can't be chain link?
Cannot be chain link. No.
And we're prepared to meet whatever code requirements are applied to that fence. I'd like to get into lead plan consistency if there are no other questions about the master concept plan or the deviations. Again, this is located in the urban community future land use category. The description includes that predominant land uses in that category will be residential, commercial, public, and quasi-public, and limited light industrial with future development encouraged to be mixed use. Rezoning the subject property from community commercial to commercial plan development will allow for commercial development that will support the existing surrounding uses. The underlying future land use category is characterized by a mixture of relatively intense commercial and residential uses, which would accurately describe the proposed commercial project. The CPD's proposed schedule of uses has been tailored to address the project's specific commercial needs. Lead Plan Goal 4 relates to general development standards. Pursue or maintain land development regulations which protect the public health, safety, and welfare, encourage creative site designs, and balance development with service availability and protection of natural resources. The proposed project will be in compliance with all land development code regulations except where deviations are requested to enhance the overall plan development and when the request protects the public health, safety, and welfare. The project is providing 30% open space, or 2.78 acres of the site's overall area, which is consistent with the requirements set forth in Land Development Code Section 10-415. Lead Plan Standard 4.1.1 and 4.1.2, water and sewer. Potable water and sanitary sewer services will be provided to the site by Lee County Utilities. A letter of availability from Lee County Utilities is enclosed in the application package that letter indicates that service is available to accommodate the projected demand. Policy 6.1.1, all applications for commercial development will be reviewed and evaluated as to, and the policy goes on to list several criteria, 8 criteria, with parens indicating whether it applies to a rezoning, development orders, or both. Criteria B has been stricken on this page because it applies to development orders only. The rest do apply to rezonings. A traffic impact study was performed to assess traffic and access impacts. The findings of the study include a trip generation of 21 total PM peak hour trips and 13 AM peak hour trips. The surrounding roadway network has sufficient capacity to accommodate the additional trips generated from the proposed use, and no major roadway improvements are necessary. The project will feature the required landscape buffers appropriate for the proposed uses at this location. Lee County Utilities has confirmed adequate capacity to provide the subject property with potable water and sanitary sewer services. And the proposed project is in close proximity to current and future commercial projects, although no similar facilities exist within close proximity to the site. Environmental considerations are further outlined in the Protected Species Survey. Policy 6.1.3, commercial developments requiring rezoning and meeting development of county impact thresholds must be developed as commercial plan developments designed to arrange uses in an integrated and cohesive unit in order to provide visual harmony and screening, reduce dependence on the automobile, promote pedestrian movement within the development, utilize joint parking, access, and loading facilities, avoid negative impacts on surrounding land uses and traffic circulation, protect natural resources, and provide necessary services and facilities where they are inadequate to serve the proposed use. The project is being developed as a commercial plan development in direct compliance with the aforementioned policy. The project will feature the required landscape buffers appropriate for the proposed uses at this location. The commercial plan development will provide the required stormwater management features. The proposed master concept plan depicts how all intensity will be isolated on a portion of the property, which will promote pedestrian movement within the project and eliminate the need for vehicular travel internal to the site. The project is in a predominantly residential area with a variety of existing and planned commercial uses. Policy 6.1.4, commercial development will be approved only when compatible with adjacent existing and proposed land uses and with existing and programmed public services and facilities. The proposed project is in an area with existing commercial projects to the west of the subject property and across the street to the north. The planned development would serve significant consumer demand in the area for this facility. Lee County Utilities has identified that the subject property is within the Lee County Utilities future service area as depicted on maps 4A and 4B of the Lee Plan. Lee County Utilities confirmed potable water and sanitary sewer service availability for the proposed intensity of uses, which will produce an estimated flow demand of 985 gallons per day. Potable water services will be provided by Green Meadows Water Treatment Plant, and sanitary sewer services will be provided by Fiesta Village Water Reclamation Facility. Policy 6.1.6, the land development regulations will require that commercial development provide adequate and appropriate landscaping, open space, and buffering. Such development is encouraged to be architecturally designed so as to enhance the appearance of structures and parking areas and blend with the character of existing or planned surrounding land uses. The project is abiding by all Land Development Code regulations except where deviation has been requested, which will not cause impacts to public health, safety, or welfare. The Land Development Code requires the project to provide adequate buffering based on planned and surrounding uses, 30% of the site to be open space, as well as additional landscaping in the form of building perimeter plantings and tree islands in the parking lot spaced every 10 spaces. Policy 6.1.7, prohibit commercial developments from locating in such a way as to open new areas to premature, scattered, or strip development, but permit commercial development to infill on small parcels where areas where existing commercial development would make a residential use clearly unreasonable. The site is an undeveloped property that is adjacent to an existing commercial plan development. The subject property abuts a residential development to the south. However, a 30-foot type F buffer is proposed as depicted on the master concept plan, which will provide adequate buffering between these uses. The request would not allow commercial encroachment into residential areas and would direct it to an appropriate location abutting an arterial roadway proximate to other commercial centers and near residential rooftops that would serve as patrons of the proposed use. Land Development Code Section 34-145-D4A1 provides criteria for rezonings. Criteria A, that it complies with the LEA plan. The request is consistent with the uses set forth by the Urban Community Future Land Use Designation. Criteria B, meets this code and other applicable county regulations or qualifies for deviations. The request complies with all sections of the Land Development Code except where a deviation is requested, or deviations are requested, and demonstrates the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. C, is compatible with existing and planned uses in the surrounding area. The proposed development is highly compatible with the surrounding land uses given the existence of proximate commercial uses as well as planned commercial uses. D, will provide access sufficient to support the proposed development intensity. Access to the property is provided via Gladiolus. The traffic impact study demonstrates that the request results in minimal impacts. The current access is sufficient to support the proposed use. E, the expected impacts on transportation facilities will be addressed by existing county regulations and conditions of approval. Approval of the request will not have a significant impact on the surrounding roadway network as outlined in the zoning traffic impact study. F, will not adversely affect environmentally critical or sensitive areas and natural resources. And, no impacts to critical or sensitive areas and natural resources are proposed through this request. The environmental survey conducted by Owen Environmental Consulting, LLC found no wetlands or protected species on the subject property. G, will be served by urban services defined in the LEA plan if located in a future urban service category. As noted in the enclosed letter of availability, the project will be serviced by infrastructure providing potable water and sanitary sewer services. The property is also accessible via LEA Tran Route 130. Excuse me. The proposed use or mix of uses is appropriate at the proposed location. The proposed use is appropriate at this location. It abuts an arterial roadway which has sufficient capacity to access the property. It is surrounded by commercial uses of different nature and is located in proximity to residential patrons. B, the recommended conditions provide sufficient safeguards to the public interest and are reasonably related to the impacts on the public interest expected from the proposed development. The proposed development will not have a negative impact on the community. All proposed elements of the development, including deviations, protect the public interest. C, if the application includes deviations pursuant to section 34-373A9, that each requested deviation, number 1, enhances the achievement of the objectives of the plan development, and 2, preserves and promotes the general intent of this code to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. All deviations requested enhance the plan development's ability to function as designed in a compact site with very limited environmental impacts. Are there any questions before I conclude?
No, thank you. Go ahead.
Here, I'd like to conclude by saying that we appreciate with this request. For the record, staff is recommending approval of this request. We are happy to remain and discuss any of the testimony that's been provided, the application materials that have been submitted, or respond to any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So, Madam Hearing Examiner, the last thing before we conclude our presentation is you asked for clarification on the condition that staff and the applicant had agreed upon. Specifically, I think it's 2G, as numbered in staff's response on February 1, 2023. And it is intended to plot that condition stating that the landscape plans must include the architectural drawings depicting no doors, windows, and/or mechanical equipment along the rear of the storage building. It's intended to apply only to the southernmost building, the 11,500 square foot building. And staff agrees. So we probably, if you'd like us to discuss how to clarify that in language before we conclude here today, we have
The
to.
taller building can have window openings.
Yes, that's
Just so I
correct.
understand.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to add southernmost storage building. I think that pretty much covers it, right?
I think it does.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. And that concludes the applicant's presentation.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take a 5-minute break, and then we'll resume with county staff's presentation of their staff report.
Oh, thank you. I can read. Thank you.
I'm gonna keep this one because I'm,
Yeah.
thank you.
You sure she needs that? What's it? She likes all that being written like that.
Yeah, I think,
But she,
depending on, you can hit the policy and say, it complies because X, Y, Z, and it just depends, you gotta just says.
I got that. I got the hurry up eyes.
Yeah, I mean, she's taking notes and stuff. By the end, she's kind of like, all right, I get it, you gotta go through this, but I get it, it's consistent, that's kind of.
I hate the hurry up eyes.
You hate what?
I hate the hurry up eyes.
There's this judge in Tallahassee. When I first got out of that, I practiced it, but he's a federal judge. And he used to be able to tell he'd heard enough. If he was not buying your position or if he had questions, he would just hammer you. Like, he wouldn't let you get 5 minutes and he would start asking questions. Because if he just was like, yeah, okay, I get what you're arguing, you're right, he wouldn't ask you anything. Kind of, the first motions I got arguing from was a motion for summary judgment. And in the federal courthouse, which is, the federal court is massive, right? Like you feel like an ant up there in front of him. Arguing and kind of going on. He asked me 1 or 2 questions, and then you could tell he just lost interest. He takes off his glasses, he's cleaning his glasses, and he's just sort of like, and I'm like, and so I said at that point, I said, Judge, I had some more argument that I could go through, but I think I covered it some. And we aimed at that, and he goes, and because his glasses, and he goes, smart man. And
Nice seeing
he
you.
turns and looks at the other side and says, I'm ready to hear you. And then he granted my motion, and I'll never forget that. Like, it was just like, you could tell the cue, he was like, I'm over it. Smart man, sit down. You're from here now.
I'm gonna signal to you that I'm over it.
That's right.
I think that's what the cleaning of the glasses was for.
Context clues.
Yeah, yeah.
Excuse me just a second. Can we get somebody to clarify what the building is gonna be made out of? Like, is it gonna be some type of aluminum, cheap looking stuff? You know how the corrugated.
Grills have been determined at this time.
Yeah, and also what kind of a planter looking stuff is gonna be on the Bass Road side? He didn't go over any kind of landscaping. Yeah.
No resident manager, so to speak.
She is very astute in picking up on that condition is not entirely clear when it applies to it. I would, well, but I would,
I looked at it and I was like, okay, are we okay with this? And then after we were okay with it, I didn't really think about the fact that we should have clarified that.
however, if it stood as is, you would request that it be interpreted to mean only the south building, because that ambiguity has to go down.
Well, it's better to have it clarified now, so we don't get into it later on with staff.
No surprises at DL.
That's the last thing.
Have to go back and ask for an ADD or something.
Yeah, so there's enough room. Right, we're required.
Yeah.
U-turn would be, there's no entry, no point where our entrance is.
Richard, we have to work on taking a breath when we're speaking.
It's just how I am. I can't help
I
it.
know you are.
Been that
I
way
am
forever.
too, so I can't really talk.
Just how
I'm
I
over here going, I'm too old for this.
I tried not to micro machine man you, but
You did pretty well. Towards the end, you got a little,
I was getting the hurry up feel from others.
oh, okay, yeah, yeah. Well, after a while, it's like you just wanna, everybody can see what you're reading, so you just kinda wanna get through it. I mean, I totally get it.
But you have to write it all.
Yes,
We try to remember that.
yes, that's, you must know a court reporter, because most people don't know that you say write, not type.
That you what? Most people
You
don't.
say you write it, not type it. So I figured you must know a court reporter.
Correct. Just the southern buildings are southeastern. And it's just for the construction issue as you go towards the lake.
Do you have an extra,
Sorry.
do you have an extra copy of your PowerPoint?
Yes.
I've been watching, but I missed that part because I had a call.
Let me make sure Richard's okay with me giving this one.
Well, we're good?
We are good, we are good. No, I think, thank you.
Giving this away to.
I mean, the office can scan an email to me, but it just saves her from having to do that. If I can get a copy. This is the link that was posted.
Oh, you got it.
I got it, so you don't have to mess with anything. We'll see what Sharon has.
What?
You have an extra copy of your PowerPoint, then Maria.
I don't have.
Our next step
Sharon, you speak from the heart, that's it.
Yeah.
So, I'm listening, I got a phone call, and then I just heard
That's how you speak.
Matt say the southern buildings and the windows, I missed that part, what happened, that's why.
We're getting ready to start again, if everybody could just.
Oh, thank you.
We are back on the record with staff's presentation. Sharam?
Yes. Good morning. Sharon Benamchian from Lee County Zoning. My resume is on file. I was recognized as expert in zoning in the past. I would like to be recognized as such.
Yes, please proceed.
Thank you. The request is to rezone about 9 acres from community commercial to CPD for mini storage building and storage, public warehousing. The future land use designation's urban community. And this type of projects, we had several of them in the past. And this one, staff recommended approval for several reasons. One is it's right adjacent to a row of single-family house. And CC zoning, the existing zoning, allows retail stores, allows restaurants. They are very noisy businesses. They have deliveries in the back and all, but many storage buildings are usually very quiet neighbors. And being right adjacent to a residential single-family subdivision, that makes a better neighbor than having a restaurant or a grocery store or something else. They are requesting for deviations. Staff recommends approval of those four subject to conditions. Staff revised the schedule of uses a little bit. There were some uses that they really didn't belong there. And also, we revised the rear setback. It doesn't make sense to have 15-foot rear setback when we are required to have 30-foot buffer. So the master concept plan that they have, it shows 15-foot setback and needs to be revised The one in the staff report, I crossed out that 15 foot. But, and the only outstanding issue they had with us was about the landscaping for to the south, which I think now we are in agreement. And answering your question about no windows, the only building that says no windows and no equipment in the back is the southern building. An enhanced buffer applies to where the building is located. The rest is just 30-foot type F buffer. And with that said, they are in full compliance with all requirements of the LEAP plan, goals, policy, and objectives of the LEAP plan, and the Land Development Code. Staff recommends approval subject to staff conditions.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I have received a email this morning from a neighbor, Ms. Pat Imbrie. She's objecting to this, and it basically is not the perfect mix with the library, and it doesn't fit in the area. If you're interested.
Yes, I'll take that. I'll mark that as Staff Exhibit 1.
With that said, this is a commercial plan development, and they have to comply with our architectural guidelines. So the building is not going to be like typical old warehouse buildings. As you have seen the newer buildings, they look more or less like office buildings because of the code requirements. So it is going to look a nice office-looking building, but very few,
Hopefully no bright.
traffic. It's going to be very quiet, and that's one of the reasons staff is recommending approval of this project.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just want to note that the record will be held open for revised master concept plan to reflect a 30-foot setback along the rear property line. And since you're already going to have to redo the master concept plan, I would like there to be clarifying notes distinguishing between the regular F buffer area and the enhanced F buffer area. I'm ready for public input. I'm going to go through these sheets one by one, and then at the end of the last sheet, I'll just make sure there isn't anyone out there that is a member of the public that wants to speak that didn't fill one out. Louis Brida? Yes. Thank you. Please come to the podium. Can we get the aerial? It was in somebody's PowerPoint where it showed a good portion of the community, and thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Good morning. I'm not sure how to properly address you in that.
Madam Hearing Examiner is good.
Adam Hearing. My name is Lou Bryda, B-R-Y-D-A. Thank you for pronouncing it correctly. I live at 9029 Gladiolus Preserve Circle in the Gladiolus Preserve community. Thank you for the information. I did have a couple of questions that I wasn't clear on as the presentation was made. The lighting in the south side of the building, how is that going to be handled? And will that be on at all times? And that also, will this be a manned facility, 24 hours or only during certain hours of the day? Will access to the units be 24 hours, or will there only be certain hours? I know you've mentioned traffic patterns in the morning and evening, but it doesn't cover the late hours or early morning hours. And then will there be security provided at this facility to monitor and make sure that inappropriate activities are occurring? Lastly, I wasn't able to see well from sitting where the gate is going to be located in that. And if there are a couple of vehicles backing up, what will they do for the traffic trying to go down Gladiolus? Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you, sir. Matt Devers?
The only one I have.
Good morning, thank you for coming.
Yes, I am the association manager for Gladiolus Preserve HOA, and just had a few, I guess, concerns and comments. One, the ingress and egress to the facility was a right turn only off Gladiolus, which means any vehicles.
Slow down.
The ingress and egress for the planned facility was right turn only off Gladiolus Drive. Any vehicles coming from the east from 41 would be required to make a U-turn at the entrance of Gladiolus Preserve Boulevard and Gladiolus Drive. I'm concerned with the, I guess, number of cars making a U-turn there at the intersection. Second was the location of the dumpster enclosure. I couldn't see on the plan because I think the camera's in the way, but that's going to be on the southeast part of the subject property. Would like that to be on the northeast if we have any say on that one. Lastly was the discharge of the water from the facility through the culvert into the Gladiolus Preserve Lake. They addressed in the beginning that there may be ways to minimize that discharge and keep water on the subject property and I guess have the minimal amount possible go towards the HOA's lake. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Malsbury? Malsbury, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Again, my name is Richard Malsbury. I live in the villages of Ascot, which is this area right. The village is right up here behind this vacant pond. We had no flooding during Hurricane Ian, and I think probably one of the big reasons for that is that the subject property is a low area. It absorbed a lot of the runoff and directed the flow of the runoff through the culverts in the southwest to the west into the Deep Lagoon 2020 area. So that would be an important function of that property is water absorption. And there's a creek that runs through Deep Lagoon that takes the water directly to Estero Bay. In developing this property, there would most likely be the complete elimination of all vegetation that's currently there in a way that is similar to another project up the street where a massive storage facility is also being built. I am assuming that one of the reasons for digging the pond is that fill would then be used to raise the rest of the property up to meet the height requirements for development. I'm not sure whether that would be sufficient fill and whether they would have to bring in hundreds of truckloads of more fill to raise the property higher. In that case, it would be disruptive to the community for the period of construction. The project, as we can see from their proposal, at least half of it would be more impervious surface that would be created either through asphalt or concrete structure or roofing material. This would create faster runoff, which would need more culverting in order to remove the water to the west to the creek through Deep Lagoon. The warehouse And the property, because of the impervious surface, would also create more heat and raise the temperature level in the surrounding area. The warehouse, regardless of the statements made here, and a lot of the assumptions, which I believe would be false in terms of impacting the community, the warehouse facility would not be similar in structure to surrounding buildings in the residential areas. There's residential areas on 3 sides, villages of Ascot to the north, another village on the other side of Bass Road, and the Gladiolus Preserve to the south. And the buildings that are commercial in nature to the west are conforming buildings. They blend in with the surrounding area. This would be a warehouse-type building, a big rectangular block structure, and in appearance, it would not blend in. There would most likely be, as there are in most storage facilities, security lighting, which would be disturbing to the neighborhood, and it would probably go all night long and destroy what remains of the night sky in the area. There are already 2 storage facilities on the same street, just further to the west. One near the Publix grocery store, and then another at the corner of Pine Ridge Road and Gladiolus. And then to the east, they're building another huge storage facility now, where they wiped out a really marvelous pine forest to do that and created more impervious surface and more heat trapping situations. So I'm not sure in their market research how they came up with the need that there's for another storage facility. With the completion of that one down by Summerlin and Gladiolus, there's going to be 3 storage facilities within a 2-mile stretch of Gladiolus. A question I would have would be how much asphalt is around the buildings and whether that asphalt goes adjacent to Gladiolus and to Bass Road. So those are basically my comments.
Thank you, sir. Jeanette Johnson?
Right here.
Ma'am, you must speak at the podium. State your name for the record, please.
Jeanette Johnson. I live in Laguna Lakes subdivision, and I was really shocked to find out that they're going to put a commercial building of this size in that corner because it's traffic for the hospitals coming through there, the libraries coming through there. Gladiolus is a major thoroughfare, and it didn't seem to me to fit the rest of the neighborhood like the previous gentleman said. I just don't think there's a need for it because there's a huge storage unit being constructed right down the road, which is ugly already. There's dust and everything in the air when they're developing it. So I don't see the need for it. I'd rather see a nice, even a little shops and things, would be better than this monstrosity that looks like it's going to be. I appreciate your input and everything. I hope you do the best and if it's approved, but I don't see the need for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. Carol Massimino?
Yep.
Good morning. Thank you for coming, Carol.
Thank you for pronouncing it correctly. My name's Carol Massimino. I live in Parker Lakes, which is this neighborhood right here. I also have a rental property there. My main concern is traffic. First of all, this light, Lee County hasn't fixed yet from the storm. It blew away the left turn signal. Can't take a left turn. I am currently in the process of retiring from the Lee Health System, and I work at Health Park. I don't know if everybody's aware, but at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., the nurses come and go, and this gets backed up all along here with the nurses trying to get to work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and at night, everybody's leaving. The ambulances come up there. I'm just concerned with more traffic, that there's going to be delays, there's going to be an accident. Plus, with main thoroughfare 41 being east of us, and this is the first turn down on the way to the beach or any of these areas from 41 going north. A lot of cars come down here, and where are they going to turn to get in there? There's no place, there's no way to get in there. There isn't even a light. I know all of you at Gladiolus Preserve, my brother lives there. Getting in and out of there lately has been horrible. Just because of the traffic, there's no light there or on the other end. So I think traffic is a concern. I don't know if it's a 24/7 operation, I don't know. But 7, which they had mentioned, 7 o'clock is one of their busiest times. That's when shift change happens at the hospital, which is right down the street. And I think that's a concern.
Thank you. We already have a Richard Mossberg. Okay, that's everybody. Is there anyone else that is here that would like to speak? Yes.
Williams.
Please come forward. Did?
Yes, I did. I did.
Oh, Madonna Williams, please come forward.
There you go. Good morning.
My apologies, ma'am.
It's okay. I'm Madonna Williams. I'm from Gladiolus Preserve Circle, the Gladiolus Preserve community. I live at 9469 Gladiolus Preserve. I think, first of all, that this proposed project is probably going to be a relatively quiet, good neighbor for Gladiolus Preserve. But I have major concerns about water runoff because you're going to be changing from an open area to one that's a paved area. And I noticed in the presentation that the 50-foot setback for the lake area, the water retention pond, is a deviation being requested for 25 feet. If that is not granted, then it would not fulfill, I believe, the 25-year 3-day storm qualification that we're looking at. And we've just gone through a 100-year storm. And Gladiolus Preserve was definitely affected by flooding that happened due to that. So if there's anything that we can do to slow down the discharge from the property or increase the capacity in some way, I think that that would be very beneficial to us. Storage facilities always have the ugly factor that's involved. So when we're looking at the elevations, I would hope that we could do something that is going to make it compatible with the surrounding communities, not big and orange or lots of brilliant cricket green or something like that, but something that would be more neutral tones that would make it fit in. I'm sure that plans could be made that would take care of that. Traffic always is a concern. Getting into the main entrance off of Gladiolus Drive into Gladiolus Preserve is getting busier and busier, as is Bass Road also. So getting in and out is becoming difficult. I don't know how that can be addressed, but I think that it needs to be concerned with because of the fact that more traffic as more people are moving to Florida on a daily basis needs to be one of our major thoughts. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present that would like to put comments on the record? Thank you very much. That's it, one time. Okay, we're going to go back to the parties to respond to some of the issues that were raised. First of all, I think it would be helpful to have a more detailed discussion on how stormwater runoff is going to be handled, where it lands, where it travels, why the lake is the size it is, how long is it held in the lake, at what rate is it discharged, not using numbers, but to explain to people what the code is regarding your discharge can't exceed what existed before. This sort of information would be very helpful. I think it would be very helpful for the planners to walk through the perimeter buffer in detail and to talk about the code required architectural controls that will be placed on this building insofar as it's a commercial building and what in Chapter 10 is required in general for the structure, the appearance of this structure. Unfortunately, I don't have any control of the color of the accents that they choose. I know some of these storage facilities, they have their signature colors that they use. I can't promise you that it won't be cricket green or bright red or something like that, but our code does regulate the architectural features of the building insofar as what faces the roadways, and I'll have them spend some time clarifying that for you and any of the other questions that you may have raised. Thank you, Richard. If we can get the master concept plan back up on the screen. You need a break?
No, do you think they look a little befuddled?
No, I'll take the time.
All right, thank you, Madam Hearing Examiner. Mr. Schute's going to come up and talk about stormwater runoff and traffic.
Is it possible to move the camera on the bottom right?
I'm sorry. Maybe you can shift what's behind it?
I don't know how to shift that.
Is it possible to minimize it?
Okay, so you're going to focus on the placement of the dumpster? Because I know that's
No.
something, okay.
It's just one of the items on the list, and
Because
yeah.
that I know is in that south corner there.
correct. Well, I will focus on water management at this moment. To the questions on the water management lake, the South Florida water management criteria requires us to do an analysis to show that the site will not discharge more water than it currently does and do not increase the discharge rate, the flow of the water coming off the site in a post-development condition.
Okay,
And-
so let's pause for a minute. What that means is the South Florida Water Management District regulates the design of the stormwater management system to ensure that that culvert is not going to be forced to take more water than is traveling through it right now at a faster rate. Go ahead.
As far as the lake size, a larger lake does several things. As one of the members of the public indicated, it does help with the placement of fill on the site. It's less construction traffic on the road if we can maximize the quantity of material that we can excavate out of the lake. If the lake is made smaller, we can certainly still make it work. It requires the site to have a little bit more fill on it, placed on it, and the fill come from elsewhere, off-site areas, and therefore, during construction, be a little more construction traffic on the road. That's very temporary, of course. The other benefit of a larger lake, it's not really in any codes, but it's an engineering perspective, is that a larger surface area increases the evaporation, evapotranspiration qualities of water. So that helps keep lake levels lower and water table areas a bit lower. Smaller lakes means the water is just stacked higher onto the site, but it's still controlled by their perimeter berms, our weir, or what do we call a control structure, that still controls how much water comes off the site at any given time.
Okay, so could you please explain that water will hit the concrete, the impervious surfaces, how it will travel to the lake, what is the function of the lake, what is the lake designed to do vis-a-vis the stormwater regarding the nutrients and all that, and then what it means to have a weir control the discharge.
Okay. So stormwater will enter the site from roof drainage and parking lot drainage. The buildings will generally tie into some storm drains that we've placed on the front of the site, culverts, inlets, what other terms you might call those, and be piped to dry retention swales around the lake. Additionally, there'll be a dry retention, which means it's dry after the rain event is over. The water goes out of the site. It becomes a dry area. It's not a wet pond. It's a dry swale. And that's another method how water will go through the site towards the lake. One of the components that the state, the Water Management District, also requires us to look at is water quality. The stormwater lake and the dry detention swales provide mitigation for pollutants that could come onto the site. By holding the water back and slowing it down, the pollutants are able to be absorbed by the stormwater management system and not discharged off-site. Another thing that is helpful for pollutant loadings is that roofs of buildings, while they're impervious, they do not pollute. They really have nothing up there that is causing pollutants. So yes, the water doesn't the water still goes into the water management area, but the roof area itself is not considered a pollutant. The parking lot areas really are not a great deal of this site compared to some of the other potential uses of this site. Often if you have a large building such as a potential shopping center, pharmacy or something, you're going to have large parking lot areas, which parking lot areas actually do increase your potential for having pollutants on your site, because that's where the cars go. That's where the potential fuel can come out of a car. But the main idea is that we're required, we're going to design this water management system to provide the water quality treatment and the water quantity attenuation so that we do not discharge more water, that we do not increase the runoff rate that there is now. It reduces the risk of flooding. The lake is controlled, we call it a weir. It's basically a concrete box that is set at a certain elevation and has a certain size opening that is fixed. And we size that opening based on how much water is allowed to go off the site. And generally for a site like this, I mean, the opening that most of the water is going to go through is probably 6 inches wide. We haven't fully designed it. And until we get to the 25-year storm event, and it happens, of course, although the flooding from Ian was probably not considered a 25, that was coastal flooding.
Under normal circumstances, explain how the lake functions and how the elevation of the lake will trigger the use of the water leaving the site.
So because of the limited discharge rate, the water that falls into the site gets stored into the lake system, and it just rises as the rainfall comes down and is held there, controlled by the weir structure that I previously mentioned. Because the water can't leave very fast, the site stores all its water on site between the lake banks and the perimeter berms. Once the water downstream dissipates and the controlled volume of water goes out our control structure, the lake slowly draws back down.
Right, so the lake has to reach a certain elevation before it'll discharge water. And the amount of water that it discharges is controlled by the size of the opening.
Correct.
So that's going to control the quantity and the rate that water will come through the culvert.
Correct. Any more clarification for water management?
Not on that. I'm ready for transportation.
Again, as I previously mentioned in our original testimony, the traffic for the site is really low. I don't have my notes in front of me now, but I think we stated it was 13 morning trips, and these trips occur during the peak hours of the adjacent streets, not necessarily the peak hour of the facility. That's what we're required to analyze for.
Yeah, and Mr. Shute, could you explain, because I believe there was a comment about peak time being 7 o'clock. Can you understand where that number comes from and what that really means?
Correct. I was trying to elaborate that. The 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. time is the peak hour of the adjacent roadways when they mention shift change potentially at the hospitals. That is just the amount of trips that could go to this. The previous number of trips of 13 a.m. or 21 p.m., those are just the trips that may go to this facility during that time of day. Of the 204 average daily trips, those are the times. The other times of the day is trips are going through the site at other times of the day as well. As far as the right in, right out, yes, there'll have to be a U-turn for cars to go into the site if they're coming from 41 from the east. We mapped 50% of our PM trips coming from the west and 50% from the east during the times that in peak traffic in the afternoon. That means potentially 4 cars would be making a U-turn at the intersection of Gladiolus Preserve, I can't read the name of the road there, and then another 4 cars would come from the from the west. So again, if there maybe 4 over a 2-hour period, as the stats say, that means 1 every 15 minutes, 1 every 20 minutes, potentially making a U-turn just to go to this facility. That is really a very small amount. During our development order process, we do have to do additional traffic analysis for things like turn lanes. If we're shown to be impacting and increasing the storage on either Bass Road or Gladiolus, we'll be required to lengthen turn lanes based on the county staff's input. Even if we trigger a intersection signal, that's also
Possible but unlikely, given the low trip generation.
yes, it's reviewed in the development order stage, and it's unlikely, but it will be reviewed during that stage, and we will not get a building permit, site permit, unless we satisfy that criteria. I'm going to correct my statement. So I said 4 and 4, it's actually 4 and 6, potentially 6 making a U-turn over a 2-hour period.
Mr. Shute, did you have, there's been some discussion about it's a community commercial zoning. Did you look at, or have you considered what the traffic might have been generated by an alternative use allowed under the CC zoning?
So in between my previous testimony, I did go through the list of uses, and I see things like pharmacy and department stores and food stores, convenience stores. Those are some of the items I saw listed as a CC approved use, and those historically generate much more traffic for facilities like this, and they can have similar roof building sizes. If you have a department store, say a Target qualifies as kind of a department store, it's going to be just as big as this or bigger. But those are high trip generators. They would definitely have to be reviewed closer for traffic impacts as something as intense as those uses was put on this site.
There was also a question about the location of the entrance gate, if it was gated, and how that might affect backing traffic up out onto Gladiolus. Could you address that?
So there are 3 gates proposed, actually. The gates are set back from the entrance. The office area is intended to be in this area of the building, and traffic will be able to freely flow through these parking spaces in front of the building. And we have a security gate here, a security gate here, and this will be an exit gate only. So traffic will be able to enter here to get to the back of the facility, and will only exit out this side, which is close to the throat of the intersection. So for cars coming into the site, there's plenty of room for stacking, and this area is also provided for turning around a large truck if needed as well.
Well, that's interesting that you highlighted that, because in terms of site design and off-site impacts, it's curious to me that you would choose to put the dumpster area where a garbage truck has to go all the way into the project through gates in order to collect trash at the back of the project closest to the residential development. Just an observation, if that's where the gates are, you know.
The other challenges is with this siting of a dumpster is that putting them on the main thoroughfares as well, they're not very scenic on Gladiolus and Bass Road if we put it up in
There's
this
no
area.
avoiding it based on the traffic circulation plan that's envisioned for this, I guess.
Right,
Regardless, the truck is going to be going around the perimeter.
correct. But the staff has the ability to let the refuse collection truck go through the gate. And incidentally, I did get the hours anticipated for this facility. It will not be a 24-hour operation. It's anticipated to be 6 a.m. It's anticipated to be 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. For this location. It's secured by security cameras. There's not planned to have a 24-hour security guard.
So there's going to be an on-site security guard between the hours of 6 a.m. and 10 p.m.?
No, there's no on-site security guard anticipated. They use security cameras.
Okay, so the gates will not be opened after 10 p.m. at night?
Correct. It will be closed after 10 p.m. at night.
Okay, I'm going to make that a condition of approval then, a restriction on the hours. If this is the case, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., there's no on-site security.
That's what he texted me.
If you want to debate it, you can
Can we
do it
confirm with-
before the board.
Okay. I haven't had a chance to talk to him, so maybe we could, when we get done with this, talk briefly before we conclude. Would that be okay? Just,
Sure.
okay, thank you.
I mean, I don't know if there's a concern about it being a 24-hour operation. My concern is if it's going to be a 24-hour operation in basically what is a residential area, that there's no caretaker or on-site security during those hours. That's troubling to me from a compatibility standpoint with the adjacent neighborhoods.
Potentially, could the condition be an either or, security or only open during certain hours?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll still get with you if we can keep it open.
Yeah, we can, yeah.
Gate.
The other thing, Mr. Shute, just on the dumpster, can you clarify, is the dumpster something that can be used by the individuals who have storage units, or is that not allowed?
As previously indicated, the dumpster and the deviation requesting is going to restrict the use of the dumpster to the employees of the facility. And their lease agreements will require the owners, not the owners, the lessees, are not allowed to use the dumpster. Even when they clean out their units, they're not allowed to use it. They have to take it with them. So that is the restriction that is in place.
Okay, was there anything else? Okay, I think, unless you have any other questions for Mr. Shute, we'll have Mr. Smith come up. Got it?
Madam Examiner, can I address the concern regarding lighting? Section 34-625 of the Lee County Code does place requirements on lighting for facilities such as this. It will require that all of the fixtures will be fully shielded, which means that the bulb will not extend past the actual structure of the light, and that allows the light to be directed downward and not outward from the light fixture. It also requires that at the boundary perimeter adjacent to residential that the foot candles, the measurement for measuring lighting, will be extremely low, and that that will be demonstrated through a photometric plan that will be submitted at time of development order, which will show the foot candles that it will be generated throughout the site, throughout the entirety of the site, such that it will demonstrate compliance with the code and ensuring that the intensity of the light at that property boundary adjacent to residential will be, if I recall, about 0.2 foot candles.
Thank you.
The architectural requirements that you mentioned, I'd like to ask Cindy Leal to come up and address those, if that's all right.
Cindy, please state your full name for the record.
Sorry. Cindy Brizuela for the record. Regarding the architectural standards for this project, Chapter 10 speaks specifically to commercial design. Within that, the architectural requirements specify the following: architectural features and patterns that are consistent with the community's identity and local character while reducing mass and scale and uniform monolithic appearance of large unadorned walls. That is verbatim from from Land Development Code, Section 10-620A. Additionally, all primary facades must be designed with consistent architectural style, detail, and trim features. And buildings must provide a minimum of 3 of the following: awnings and attached canopies, overhangs, porticos, arcades, peaked roof forms, display windows, clock or bell towers, or any other treatment which the director finds meets the intent of this section. Additionally, large projects are also required one of the following: specialty pavers, fountains, reflection ponds, or other water elements, surface and stormwater management facilities designed as physical or visual amenities that provide open space or aesthetic features, or any other alternative treatment or combination of the above as approved by the Community Development Director. And in addition to that, corner lots are also specifically addressed within Chapter 10 of the LDC. They do require additional architectural embellishments, such as corner towers or other design features to emphasize their location as gateways and transition points within the community. This section of the LDC also addresses roof treatments, blank wall areas, materials, and a portion of the signage code.
And when will this criteria come into play in connection with the development of this site?
During the development order phase, we will address all of these items. The development orders do require elevations of architecturals. They do require landscape plans. They require photometrics plans, as previously mentioned, and it will all be addressed during that time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Do you want me to go into buffers?
Yes, please.
There, that's fine. Thank you. I'm just going to briefly recap the proposed landscape buffers for the project. To the north and to the east, we are proposing a 15-foot wide Type D vegetative buffer. A Type D buffer requires 5 trees per 100 linear feet. Additionally, we are required to provide a hedge, and that would be in a double staggered row. Adjacent to the commercial portion on the western side, we are proposing a 5-foot wide Type A landscape buffer. This only requires 4 trees per 100 linear feet since we are abutting commercial with commercial. The 30-foot wide Type F buffer is what is proposed along the entire southern perimeter of the property. This requires 10 trees per 100 linear feet and a hedge required in a double staggered row. Wherever the southern building, which is a non-climate controlled building, abuts residential, we are proposing an enhancement. This enhancement will consist of an additional 10 trees per 100 linear feet, specifically cabbage palms.
So it's 10 plus 10 or 20 trees per linear feet.
Yes. Are there any questions? Okay. Did you have anything? Thank you.
Madam Hearing Examiner, were there any other questions or any other areas that you'd like us to address before we conclude? All right, thank you. Regarding the, okay, I was just going to say regarding the condition regarding security or hours of operation, so I believe you indicated that you would add a condition that the hours of operation would be limited to 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. That's acceptable. I guess my request might be that there be the limited hours of operation would be fine with maybe an alternative to if they wanted to extend to 24 hours or other hours, there would have to be security.
Or a manned office, I would think.
Yeah, or manned office during hours, those other hours outside of 6 to 10 p.m. I think that would be acceptable.
I want to think about that just in general. I'm inclined to limit the hours of operation just because of compatibility issues, but I want to be as flexible as possible.
Understood. All right. Thank you. Unless you have any other questions, that concludes our rebuttal.
I don't. If there isn't any closing remarks from staff, I just want to remind that I'm leaving the record open for a revised master concept plan to reflect the setbacks accurately and to clarify the distinction on the south property line regarding that type F buffer, where it'll be code standard and where it'll be enhanced. That can be depicted with hash marks or some other demarcation with a note. And of course, the condition will be revised slightly just to clarify that there's a distinction along that line between the degree of landscaping that must be provided adjacent to the Gladiolus preserved property.
Hearing Examiner, alternatively, they may remove all required setbacks from the master concept plan. We have them in the text portion of this rezoning. Doesn't need to be on the master concept plan.
So I just don't want them to be inconsistent. If you're going to have them, make them consistent with the proposed conditions of approval. Otherwise, remove the demarcations entirely and we'll let that control. It's up to you.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for coming this morning. Like I say, my recommendation will be out anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks from today. You will receive that via email if you provided your email address. You will receive that via mail if you provided only a mail address. And then you will receive notification of when the final board hearing is scheduled via your email. Thank you.